A homeless woman used sign language to talk to a little boy and made him smile for the first time in years, never imagining he was the son of the millionaire quietly watching them from afar. And what he did next shocked everyone. Before we start the story, let us know in the comments, what city are you watching from? And at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story. Lisa was sitting on a park bench, an old faded cloth on her lap, with a dozen colorful beads forming small bracelets, the only way she had to earn a few coins for food. She sighed, picked up one of the bracelets, and murmured to herself, "If each bracelet paid for one lunch, I'd already own a restaurant." That's when something made her stop. Across the park, sitting on another bench, an 8-year-old boy was crying. Crying in a way that broke your heart. No sound, but his whole body was shaking. His face was buried in his knees, and his shoulders trembled as if he was carrying the weight of the world. Lisa frowned. Something about that boy felt different. He was wearing expensive clothes, a blue wool coat, clean sneakers, and a digital watch far too big for his small wrist. He wasn't a street kid. He was a kid lost on the inside. Without thinking twice, Lisa stood up, grabbed a bracelet from her pocket, and walked over to him. "Hey, champ," she said in a soft but cheerful voice. "Is this bench big enough for two, or is it reserved for broken hearts only?" The boy lifted his head. His eyes were full of tears, red and swollen, and he stared at her without saying a word. Lisa sat down anyway. "That's okay, I'll just be the sad extra in your drama if you want, but fair warning, I cry ugly, you know, red nose, puffy eyes, total disaster, still nothing, no sound." She tried again. "Did you argue with someone? Skip school? Did something happen?" That's when the boy started moving his hands. Quick, precise motions, but no sound. Lisa blinked, confused, and then her heart started racing. He was using sign language. "Wait, are you talking to me?" she asked, surprised, and quickly responded with trembling hands. "I know a little bit of that too." The boy froze like he'd seen a ghost. "You understand signs?" he asked with unsure gestures. Lisa smiled and signed, "Yes, a little. My mom taught me. She used to say silence is the most honest language in the world." The boy wiped his tears and signed, "I miss my mom." Lisa paused. His silent words echoed loud inside her. "Where is she?" "In heaven," he signed, head down. "She died 2 years ago. Since then, my dad only works. He doesn't talk to me." Lisa's expression softened. His pain was pure, raw. She knelt beside him, letting the beads fall to the ground. "Hey, look at me," she signed slowly. "You're an amazing kid, you know that?" He looked at her, unsure. Because even with all this, she pointed around them, at the cold, the wind, the rushing world, "you still have the courage to cry. That means your heart is still alive." He stayed quiet, taking in every word. Lisa then did what she did best, turned sadness into laughter. "But seriously, if you keep crying like that, you're gonna attract every pigeon in town. They love drama. Big gossips, they go like this." She started imitating a pigeon bobbing its neck, making silly faces. "Look over there, the fancy coat kid crying in front of the homeless lady." The boy let out a small giggle, half shy, half confused, but it was real. Lisa smiled wide. "There it is. First smile of the day. See? Still works." Meanwhile, across the street, inside a discreet black car, Richard Stanford, the billionaire and the boy's father, was watching everything. He had rushed out in a panic after the security guard told him his son had run away. He'd spent hours driving around the city until he found him there, sitting with a stranger. But what left him frozen was this, the smile. Oliver was smiling, a light, natural smile, something Richard hadn't seen since the day they buried his wife. He gripped the steering wheel, not knowing what to feel. Part of him wanted to run over and hug his son. Another part was breathless, just watching this unexpected scene. Lisa and Oliver kept signing to each other. "So you're like a silence spy?" she joked. He replied, laughing. "Something like that." For a brief moment, time seemed to stand still, but the spell broke when a tall man in a black suit came running up. "Oliver," he called out of breath. "Oh my God, I finally found you." The boy got startled. "That's my dad's driver," he signed quickly. Lisa stood up, confused. "It's okay, he was just talking with me." The driver looked her up and down, suspicious. "Mr. Stanford is waiting." Before leaving, Oliver turned and signed to her. "Bye, Lisa." She smiled and replied, "Bye, spy." The black car pulled away, disappearing among the tall buildings. Lisa stood still, staring into the distance, with a strange feeling that something important had just happened. Little did she know that this brief encounter, full of tears and laughter, would be the beginning of something that would change her life forever. And everyone else's too. That night, Lisa couldn't get the boy out of her mind. Lying on the park bench, wrapped in a thin blanket full of holes, she looked up at the stars and thought about Oliver. His shy smile, the tears that had run down his small face. She sighed, adjusting the old backpack that served as a pillow. That kid has everything. Fancy clothes, name-brand shoes, a watch that probably costs more than a car. But he's all alone, she whispered to herself. Rich and sad. What a strange mix. She turned on her side, trying to find a more comfortable position on the cold bench. I bet his dad doesn't even know he cries. Probably too busy counting money or having meetings with other people in suits. Meanwhile, across town, inside a mansion that looked more like a museum, Richard Stanford was still awake. He paced back and forth across the room. He was still in his work suit, tie loosened, hair slightly messy. In his hand, he held a glass of whiskey he had barely touched. The image of his son smiling wouldn't leave his mind. 2 years. 2 whole years without seeing that smile. He walked over to the window and looked down at the glowing city. Millions of people, millions of lives. And none of them had been able to make Oliver smile, until a stranger, sitting on a park bench, did the impossible in just a few minutes. He ran his hand over his face, exhausted. Who was that woman? He asked out loud into the silence. How did she do in 5 minutes what I haven't been able to do in 2 years? He took a sip of the whiskey and closed his eyes. He knew what he had to do. He stood there for hours until the sky began to brighten. When the sun came up, Richard made a decision. He put on a coat, grabbed his car keys, and left. He had to find her. The park was empty when Richard arrived. It was just after 7 in the morning. He parked the car and walked to the bench where he had seen Oliver the day before. Nothing. He walked a little farther, scanning every corner, every shadow. And then he saw her. Lisa was sitting on the ground, leaning against a tree, with her faded cloth spread out in front of her. The beaded bracelets were neatly lined up, and she was chewing on a piece of stale bread. Richard stopped a few feet away, watching. She looked so light. Even there, sitting on the cold ground with nothing, there was something about her that radiated life. He took a deep breath and stepped closer. "Good morning," he said, his voice deep and calm. Lisa squinted at him. "Good morning. Can I help you? If you're here to buy a bracelet, they're $5 each. If you're here to ask for money, I'm sorry, but I'm the one doing the asking." Richard almost smiled but held back. "My name is Richard Stanford." Lisa kept staring at him, confused. "Nice. I'm Lisa Nobody. Pleasure." He almost laughed again, but then he took a deep breath as if gathering courage. "I'm the father of the boy you met yesterday, Oliver." Lisa's face changed instantly. She jumped to her feet, brushing her hands on her old pants. "Oliver? The little boy who was crying? Is he okay? Did something happen?" "He's fine," Richard answered quickly. "Better than he's been in a long time, actually." Lisa relaxed a bit, but she was still looking at him with suspicion. "So, what do you want with me?" Richard hesitated. This conversation was harder than he thought. "I wanted to thank you for what you did yesterday." Oliver hadn't smiled in 2 years, not since his mother passed away. Lisa felt a tightness in her chest. "I'm sorry." "And yesterday?" Richard's voice cracked a little. "Yesterday was the first time I saw my son smile again." There was a heavy silence between them. Lisa crossed her arms, but her expression had softened. "He's an amazing kid. He just needed someone to really see him." Richard swallowed hard. Her words hurt more than they should have. "I know," he said quietly. Lisa tilted her head, studying the man in front of her. He looked powerful, important, but also lost. "Let me guess," she said, now with a sharper tone. "You're the kind of dad who works so much he forgets he has a kid at home, right?" Richard stared at her, surprised by her bluntness. "Oh, so you're the busy dad who prefers spreadsheets over hugs." He didn't know what to say. No one had ever spoken to him like that. No one had ever dared. Lisa went on, with no mercy, but every word hit like the truth. "You know what the problem is with people like you? You think money fixes everything. That paying for an expensive school, designer clothes, imported toys, that's love. But it's not. Kids don't want an allowance. Kids want attention. They want you to put down your phone and ask how their day went. They want you to sit on the floor and play, even if it feels silly. They want you to be there. Richard pressed his lips together. Every word hit like a sharp blade. Oliver doesn't need a rich father, she finished, eyes locked on his. He needs a present one. The silence that followed was deafening. Richard took a deep breath, taking it all in. He could have been offended, could have walked away, but he didn't, because deep down he knew she was right. "You're right," he admitted, voice low. "I failed him." Lisa blinked, surprised. She hadn't expected him to agree. "But I want to change that," Richard went on, looking straight into her eyes. "And I think you can help me." "Me?" Lisa almost laughed. "How? I want you to work at my house. As a nanny. Oliver needs someone like you." Lisa froze. For a second she thought she'd misheard. "Sorry, what? I'm serious." She let out a loud, honest laugh and shook her head. "You've got to be kidding. Did you hit your head on the way here?" "I'm not joking. Look at my resume, pal." Lisa opened her arms, pointing at the bracelets scattered on the ground. "I sell bracelets on the street. I sleep under a store awning. My last steady job was 3 years ago, and I got fired for arguing with the manager. You really want me to take care of your kid?" "Yes." The answer came fast, firm, without hesitation. "But I'm not a nanny. I can barely take care of myself." Richard stepped forward. "You made my son smile. In 5 minutes, you did what I couldn't in 2 years. That's worth more than any degree." Lisa swallowed hard. Part of her wanted to believe him, as a purr. But the other part, the part that had been let down so many times, told her to be cautious. "And what do I get out of this?" she asked, challenging. "A fair salary, a place to live, meals, and the chance to make a difference in a child's life." Lisa looked at him, searching for any sign of a lie, a trap. But all she saw was honesty. She took a few steps, thinking, biting her lip. "This is crazy." "Maybe," Richard admitted, "but sometimes crazy is the only sensible thing to do." Lisa stopped and looked at him again. "You really think I can help?" "I'm sure of it." She took a deep breath, looking around. The park, the bracelets, the life she knew. It wasn't much, but it was hers. And suddenly, there was someone offering something different. Something impossible. "All right," she said, barely believing her own words. "But if this is some kind of prank, I swear I'll sell bracelets outside your company's front door." Richard smiled for the first time. Lisa picked up her things, stuffed the bracelets into her old backpack, and looked at him with a smirk. "I hope your house has a decent bathroom, because I haven't showered in 3 days and I smell like a wet pigeon." Richard couldn't help but laugh. And just like that, not really knowing what she was getting into, Lisa took the first step toward a whole new life. Richard drove in silence, focused on the road. Lisa looked out the window, watching the city go by. Fancy shops, upscale restaurants, well-dressed people rushing by with brand-name bags. "So," she started, breaking the silence, "is your house far?" "About 20 minutes from here." 20 minutes driving or 20 minutes walking? Driving. Lisa let out a low whistle. "Wow, I could walk all day and still not leave my block." Richard chuckled briefly but said nothing. She kept looking out the window, but the anxiety started to build. What was she doing? Getting into a stranger's car, going to a house she didn't know, to care for a child she'd just met? "Hey," she said, turning to Richard, "just so you know, if you're some kind of crazy kidnapper, I can scream really loud, and I bite too." Richard nearly choked on his own breath. "I'm not a kidnapper." "That's exactly what a kidnapper would say." He shook his head, trying to hide a smile. When they finally arrived, Lisa was speechless. The mansion was huge. No, huge didn't even cover it. It was massive. 3 stories, a huge garden, automatic gates, and a fountain right in the middle of the driveway. It looked like something out of a soap opera. "Oh my goodness," Lisa murmured, stepping out of the car and looking around. "Is this a house or a hotel?" "It's my house." "You live in all of this alone?" "No, I live with Oliver, and we have a few staff." Lisa did a full circle, taking in every detail. "You could fit about 50 people in here, easy." Richard locked the car and motioned for her to follow. "Come on, I'll show you the inside." As soon as the main doors opened, Lisa felt like she had stepped into another world. The floor was polished marble. A giant chandelier hung from the ceiling. Wide stairs looked like they belonged in a castle, and the paintings on the walls probably cost more than she could earn in 10 lifetimes. She stopped in the middle of the entrance hall. slowly turning around. Is this for real? Do people actually live here or just visit on special occasions? Before Richard could answer, a middle-aged woman appeared from one of the hallways. She wore a spotless uniform, her hair pulled back into a tight bun, and had an expression that could freeze water. "Mr. Stanford," she said formally, "I wasn't aware you'd be bringing company." Richard turned to Lisa. "This is Helen, the housekeeper." Lisa waved and smiled. "Hi, Helen. Nice to meet you. I'm Lisa." Helen looked her up and down, examining every detail. The worn-out clothes, the old backpack, the scuffed sneakers. Her nose wrinkled slightly, as if she had caught a bad smell. "Nice to meet you," she said, without a trace of warmth. "Lisa will be working here," Richard explained. "She's going to be Oliver's new nanny." A cold silence followed. Helen blinked, as if she wasn't sure she had heard correctly. "Nanny?" she repeated, barely hiding her disbelief. "That's right." Helen opened her mouth to say something, but held back. Instead, she forced a polite smile. "Understood. I'll prepare a room for her." "Thank you, Helen." The housekeeper walked away, but not before throwing one last sharp glance at Lisa. "I don't think she liked me very much," Lisa said as soon as Helen disappeared down the hall. "Don't mind her. Helen's tough with new people." "Tough or just unfriendly?" Richard didn't answer. At that moment, a door opened upstairs and Oliver came running down the steps. When he saw Lisa, his face lit up. He rushed down the last few steps and stopped in front of her, signing quickly and excitedly. Lisa smiled and replied in sign language. "Hey, champ, did you miss me?" Oliver nodded eagerly, again and again, then hugged her. A tight, sincere hug full of relief. Lisa felt her chest tighten. It had been so long since someone hugged her like that. Like she mattered. All right, she said, gently stroking the boy's head. "I'm here now." Richard watched the scene from a distance, and for the first time in a long while, he felt something warm in his chest, something he no longer knew how to name. In the days that followed, Lisa and Oliver settled into a routine. Every morning, after breakfast, they'd sit in the living room and make up games. Simple games, made only with gestures and laughter. "See that vase over there?" Lisa signed, pointing to a very expensive porcelain vase in the corner of the room. "I bet it costs more than a car." Oliver laughed and signed, "Way more. So let's pretend it's the king of the room, and we have to bow every time we pass by it." She stood up and made an exaggerated bow to the vase, and Oliver burst out laughing. The two of them spent the whole morning greeting furniture like royalty. In the afternoon, they invented a mime show. Lisa pretended to be a living statue, and Oliver tried to make her laugh. He made silly faces, danced in a funny way, pretended to trip. And every time she laughed, he celebrated like he had won a prize. Richard watched everything from a distance, hiding behind the office door, and for the first time in years, he smiled. A real smile, one that came from inside. But not everything was perfect. One afternoon, while Lisa was helping Oliver with a giant puzzle in the living room, Helen showed up. She carried a tray with tea, but the look she gave Lisa was anything but friendly. "Tea, miss," she said, setting the tray on the table with more force than necessary. "Thank you, Helen." The housekeeper stood there watching. Lisa tried to ignore it, but her presence felt heavy, uncomfortable. "May I ask you something?" Helen said after a long silence. Lisa looked up. "Sure. Where are you from?" "From the Central Square." "Why?" Helen crossed her arms. "And before that?" Lisa frowned. "Before that, I lived in lots of places. Why do you ask?" Helen gave a cold smile. "I just want to understand what kind of person Mr. Stanford brought into this house." The tone was clear, accusing, suspicious. Lisa stood up slowly, meeting the housekeeper's eyes. "The kind of person who's doing the job no one else here could." Helen narrowed her eyes. "Be careful, girl," she said in a low, threatening voice. "People like you don't last long around here." Lisa felt a chill run down her spine, but didn't let it show. Instead, she smiled. "Then I'd better enjoy it while it lasts, right?" Helen turned around and left the room, without saying another word. Oliver, who had watched everything in silence, signed. "Is she mean?" Lisa shook her head and signed back. "No, she's just afraid of losing her place." But deep down, Lisa knew it was more than fear. It was a threat. And she needed to stay alert. Because in that big, quiet, luxurious house, something was hidden. Something she couldn't see yet, but could feel in the air. and Lisa wasn't sure if she was ready to find out what it was. The next morning, Lisa woke up early. The room Helen had prepared for her was bigger than any place she had ever slept in. The bed was soft, the sheets smelled like lavender, and there was even a window with a view of the garden. Still, she had trouble sleeping. She was used to street noise, cold wind, and the hardness of a park bench. She got up, put on the cleanest clothes she had, and went downstairs to the kitchen. There, she found Oliver sitting at the table, stirring a bowl of cereal absent-mindedly. Lisa walked over and signed. "Good morning, champ. Did you sleep well?" He nodded yes, but his eyes were distant. She sat next to him and watched for a moment. There was something different in the way he looked out the window, like he was searching for something that wasn't there anymore. "Can I ask you something?" Lisa signed. Oliver turned to her. "Do you think about your mom a lot?" The boy's face changed. He lowered his eyes and nodded slowly. Lisa took a deep breath. She knew she was stepping into sensitive territory, but felt it was something she needed to do. "You know what I used to do when my mom died?" she signed gently. "I used to talk to her, even though I knew she wasn't here anymore." Oliver looked up, curious. "I'd talk about my day, the funny things that happened, how I was feeling. And you know what I found out? That talking to her made me feel less alone." Oliver sat quietly, thinking about every word. Lisa smiled and went on. "Want to learn a special way to talk to her?" He nodded yes, eagerly. "Then come with me." The two of them went out to the garden. The morning sun lit up the flowers, and the air was fresh and clean. Lisa pointed to the sky and began to sign. "Every time you want to talk to your mom, look up at the sky and sign, like you're sending her secret messages. It can be anything, a hi, a miss you, or even a silly joke." Oliver looked up at the sky, hesitating. "Try it," Lisa encouraged him. He took a deep breath, raised his hands, and made a simple sign. "Hi, Mom." Lisa felt her eyes sting, but held back the tears. "Perfect. Now tell her something that happened today." Oliver thought for a moment and then signed to the sky. "Today I met Lisa. She's funny. I think you'd like her." Lisa had to look away, too moved to hide it. When she pulled herself together, she smiled at the boy. "I'm sure your mom is listening, and I bet she's smiling too." They stayed there for a few more minutes, Oliver signing to the sky, and Lisa beside him, respectfully silent. On the other side of the garden, hidden behind one of the windows, Richard was watching. He had come downstairs to get coffee and ended up seeing the whole scene. He couldn't hear what they were saying, but he saw the gestures, saw the way Oliver looked up with hope in his eyes. And for the first time since he buried his wife, Richard felt that maybe there was a way back into his son's heart. The next few days were different. Lisa started teaching Oliver new ways to connect with his mom. They wrote little letters and let the wind carry them, drew stars on paper, and wrote her name on them, hummed songs she used to play on the piano. Richard started joining them too. At first he was shy, clumsy, but little by little he opened up. He sat with them in the garden, listened to Oliver talk about his mom, and even tried a few basic signs. One evening, after putting Oliver to bed, Richard found Lisa in the living room, flipping through an old photo album. "Thank you," he said, standing in the doorway. Lisa looked up. "For what?" "For giving me my son back," she smiled, closing the book. "He's always been here. You just had to look." Richard walked over and sat in the armchair next to hers. "You're amazing, you know that?" Lisa shrugged. "I just do what anyone with a heart would do." There was a warm silence between them. Then Richard sighed. "I have to go to an important dinner next week with some business people. It's a formal, boring thing, but it has to be done. Good luck with that." "The thing is, I need to go with someone." Lisa gave him a sideways look. "And?" Richard hesitated. "And I was thinking, would you like to go with me?" Lisa nearly choked. "Me? You must be out of your mind. Hit your head or something. I'm being serious." "Richard, I barely know how to use a dessert fork, and you want to take me to dinner with rich people?" "I do." "Why?" He went quiet for a moment, like he was trying to find the right words. "Because you're real, and I need someone real by my side." Lisa shook her head, laughing nervously. "This is crazy." "Maybe, but you already said yes to one of my crazy ideas before. Why not say yes to another?" She looked at him, searching for any sign he was joking. But he wasn't. "Okay," she finally said, "but if I mess something up, it's your fault." Richard smiled. "Deal." The week flew by. Lisa spent her days with Oliver and her nights nervous, thinking about the dinner. When the big day finally came, Helen showed up in her room with a dress. "Mr. Stanford asked me to bring you this." It was a simple dress but elegant, emerald green with a cut that flattered without overdoing it. Lisa held it up, stunned. "He bought this for me?" Apparently. Helen left without saying anything else. When Lisa came down the stairs that evening, she was unrecognizable. Her hair was down, the dress fit perfectly, and she wore light makeup that made her eyes stand out. Richard was waiting in the entryway, adjusting his watch. When he saw her, he froze mid-movement. His heart skipped a beat. His hands got sweaty. He couldn't breathe for a second, just stared. He didn't know she could look even more beautiful. He didn't know he'd feel that way. "You look," he began but couldn't finish. "Ridiculous?" Lisa said, stepping down the last few steps. "Beautiful," he corrected, still breathless. She blushed. "Oh, please. I look like a giraffe in high heels." Richard laughed, but he couldn't take his eyes off her. "Shall we?" The dinner was at an upscale restaurant in downtown Manhattan. White tablecloths, crystal glasses, and a pianist playing in the background. Lisa felt completely out of place, but tried to hide it. Richard introduced her to the businessmen at the table. They were polite, but there was something in their eyes, something judgmental. One of them, a man in a gray suit with a gray beard, looked Lisa up and down and commented in a low voice, but loud enough to hear, "Interesting choice of company, Stanford. Where'd you find her?" "In the gutter?" The table went silent. Lisa felt her blood boil. Richard opened his mouth to say something, but she was quicker. "Actually, it was a park bench," she said, smiling sweetly. "But don't worry, I've taken a shower since then." Some laughed, others just stared. The man blushed, unsure how to react. Lisa went on, with as much irony as she could gather. "And what about you? Where'd you learn manners?" Because clearly it wasn't a very good place. The table burst out laughing. Even Richard, trying to stay composed, let out a genuine laugh. The rest of the dinner went smoothly. But the next day, everything blew up. A photo of Lisa next to Richard at the restaurant leaked online. Within hours, it was everywhere. And the media had no mercy. The CEO's homeless date. From the streets to a billionaire's arm. Richard Stanford's new flame raises eyebrows. Lisa saw the headlines on the phone Richard had lent her. Every word felt like a knife. Richard tried to control the damage. He called his team, asked them to take down the posts, but it was too late. The internet doesn't forget. When he found her in the garden, she was sitting on a bench, staring into space. "Lisa, I'm leaving," she said without looking at him. "No. This isn't for me, Richard. I don't belong in this world. You belong by my son's side, and that's all that matters." She finally looked at him, her eyes full of tears. "They called me a homeless woman. So what? You're more than any of them will ever be." Lisa shook her head and stood up. "I need to think." Before he could say another word, she went inside, leaving Richard alone in the garden, heart aching and scared of losing her. 2 heavy days passed in silence. Lisa barely left her room. She stared out the window, thinking, trying to figure out where she fit in this world that didn't feel like hers. Oliver knocked on her door several times, asking her to play, but she just smiled and said she needed to rest. Richard had also tried to talk, but she always found a reason to leave the room. On the second night, Lisa made a decision. She waited until everyone was asleep. The house was quiet. Only the ticking of the wall clock echoed through the halls. She grabbed her old backpack, stuffed the few things she had inside, and looked around the room one last time. The place was beautiful, comfortable, safe, but it wasn't hers. Before leaving, she found a piece of paper and a pen in the drawer. With a trembling hand, she wrote, "I wasn't born to live in a castle. Thank you for everything. Take good care of Oliver. Lisa." She left the note on the bed, grabbed her backpack, and tiptoed down the stairs. Her heart was pounding, like she was doing something wrong, but she knew it was the right thing to do. For her, at least. She slowly opened the front door, praying it wouldn't make a sound. It worked. She stepped into the yard, crossed the gate, and disappeared into the early morning darkness. When Oliver woke up, the first thing he did was run to Lisa's room. He knocked on the door, but there was no answer. He slowly opened it and found the room empty. The bed was neatly made, and on top of it, a piece of paper. He picked up the note and read it. He didn't understand every word, but he understood enough. Lisa was gone. Panic took over. He ran down the hallway, stumbled down the stairs, and rushed into the office where Richard was working. Richard looked up from his computer, surprised. "Oliver? What's wrong?" The boy started signing frantically, his gestures quick and desperate. "Lisa, she's gone. I need to find her." Richard felt the floor fall out from under him. He jumped up, grabbed the note Oliver was holding, and read it quickly. No. He crumpled the paper in his hand, his heart racing. Oliver kept signing, tears streaming down his face. "Dad, please, I need her." Richard looked at his son, saw the desperation in his eyes, and something inside him broke. He picked up the phone, called his assistant, and said something he had never said before. "Cancel all my meetings today." "Mr. Stanford, but the meeting with the investors, cancel everything." He hung up, grabbed the car keys, and looked at Oliver. "Let's go find her." They left together, Richard driving through the streets of New York while Oliver stared out the window, searching for any sign of Lisa. They passed by the park where it all began, empty. Drove around the block. Nothing. They went to all the places Richard thought she might be. Then finally, they saw her. She was sitting on the ground in front of a bakery, her faded cloth spread out, with the beaded bracelets neatly lined up, as if she had never left. Richard parked the car and got out quickly. Oliver followed. Lisa saw them coming and lowered her head. "I knew you'd find me," she said without looking up. Richard stopped in front of her, taking a deep breath to steady his voice. "Why did you leave?" "Because I don't belong there." "You belong next to my son." Lisa finally looked up, and her eyes were red. "I saw the news, Richard. I saw what they're saying about me. I don't want Oliver growing up hearing that his father is with a homeless woman." Richard knelt down to her level. "You don't understand. I didn't hire you out of pity. I hired you because my son smiles when you're around. Because you brought him back to life. And me too." Lisa blinked, surprised. "You're not just the nanny, Lisa. You're part of our family now." She was about to answer when she felt someone hugging her. It was Oliver, kneeling beside her, arms wrapped around her neck, crying. Lisa closed her eyes and hugged him back, her heart tight. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, champ, I'll come back." Oliver pulled back, wiped his tears, and signed. "Promise?" She smiled and signed back, "Promise." Richard offered his hand to help her up. "But I have one condition," Lisa said, still holding his hand. "What is it?" "I want freedom. No labels, no red carpet, no pretending to be someone I'm not. If I come back as me." Richard smiled. "I don't want you to be anyone else." Lisa picked up her backpack, packed the bracelets, and followed them back to the car. When they arrived at the mansion, something felt different. Lisa sensed it as soon as she stepped in. The air was heavier, like someone had disturbed something. She went upstairs and stopped at the door. The drawers were open, clothes thrown across the bed. The backpack she had packed was dumped on the floor. Someone had been in there. Her heart raced. She looked around, searching for anything out of place, and then she saw it. On top of the dresser, one of her handmade bracelets was broken, snapped in half. That wasn't an accident. It was a message. Lisa picked up the broken bracelet and held it tightly in her hand. She knew exactly who was behind it. She rushed downstairs and found Helen in the hallway, carrying clean towels. "Someone went into my room," Lisa said, straight to the point. Helen looked at her with fake surprise. "Are you sure? Maybe you left it messy." "I didn't leave anything messy, and someone broke one of my things." Helen shrugged. "Maybe it was the wind. Wind doesn't open drawers." They stared at each other. The silence was tense, full of unspoken accusations. "Be careful what you're suggesting," Helen said, her voice low and threatening. "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm saying it." Helen took a step forward. "You're nothing but an intruder, and intruders don't last long here." Lisa didn't back down. "Then you better get used to me, because I'm not going anywhere." Helen pressed her lips together, turned her back, and walked off, her heels hitting the floor hard. Lisa stood in the hallway, her heart still racing. She knew this was just the beginning. Helen wasn't going to give up easily. She went back up to her room, locked the door, and sat on the bed, staring at the broken bracelet. Someone was trying to sabotage her. Someone wanted her gone. And Lisa needed to find out who it was before it was too late. But one thing she knew for sure, she wasn't going to let them push her out. Not this time. Because for the first time in a long while, she had something worth fighting for. A family, a purpose, and a place that, even if not perfect, was starting to feel like home, and no one was going to take that from her without a fight. The next morning, Richard had to leave early for the company. There was an important meeting with investors that couldn't be rescheduled. Before he left, he stopped by Lisa's room. "I'll be gone all day," he said, standing in the doorway. "But if anything happens, call me." Lisa was sitting on the bed, still deep in thought. "All right." Richard hesitated, as if he wanted to say more, but just nodded and left. As soon as his car disappeared through the gate, Lisa felt a chill. Something in the air felt different, wrong. She went down to the kitchen, where Oliver was already waiting with a smile on his face. They had breakfast together, joking in sign language about which cereal was the best. Lisa pretended the chocolate cereal was an army invading the honey cereal's territory, and Oliver laughed so hard he almost choked. But the peace didn't last. Helen entered the kitchen with firm steps and a stern face. "Lisa, I need to speak with you, now." Lisa exchanged a look with Oliver and stood up. "What is it? Come with me." They walked into the main living room, where the rest of the household staff were already gathered. The driver, the cook, the cleaning lady. All of them were looking at Lisa with puzzled expressions. "What's going on?" Lisa asked, her heart beating faster. Helen crossed her arms and pointed to the coffee table. "Someone stole money from Mr. Stanford's safe." Lisa blinked, confused. "And what does that have to do with me?" "I found the money in your bag." Silence filled the room. Lisa felt the ground shake beneath her feet. "What? That's not true." Helen opened Lisa's bag, which was sitting on the couch, and pulled out a bundle of bills tied with a rubber band. "Not true? Then explain this." Lisa was speechless. She looked at the money, then at Helen, then at the others. They were all staring at her with suspicion. "I didn't take that. Someone planted it in my bag." "Sure," Helen said with sarcasm, "the same old excuse. I'm telling the truth." Helen picked up the phone. "I'm calling the police." "No, wait." But Helen was already dialing. Lisa felt panic rising inside her. This couldn't be happening. Not again. Not when she had finally found a place to belong. 15 minutes later, 2 police officers were in the living room. One of them, a tall man in a blue uniform, picked up the money and examined it. "This money was found in her bag?" he asked, pointing at Lisa. "Yes," Helen replied firmly. "And you're the owner of the house?" "No, I'm the housekeeper, but the owner is currently away." The officer turned to Lisa. "What's your version of the story?" Lisa took a deep breath, trying to steady her voice. "I didn't steal anything. Someone put that money in my bag to set me up." "And who would do that?" Lisa looked straight at Helen but didn't say a word. She knew no one would believe her. The other officer picked up the bag and started searching through it. "We're going to need to take you to the station to give a statement." "No, please, I didn't do anything." That's when Oliver came running into the room. He saw the officers, saw Lisa surrounded, and panic took over him. He began signing frantically, trying to explain that Lisa was innocent, that she'd never do such a thing, that Helen was lying. But no one understood. The officers looked at the boy, confused by the gestures. Helen pretended not to notice. "What's he doing?" one of the officers asked. "He's deaf," Lisa explained, her voice trembling. "He's trying to say I'm innocent. You understand sign language?" "I do. And he's telling the truth. I didn't steal anything." The officer sighed. "Look, miss, we're still gonna need you to come with us." Tears stung Lisa's eyes. Everything was falling apart again. That's when the front door burst open. Richard walked in like a storm, his suit wrinkled, his face red with anger. "What's going on here?" Everyone turned to him. Oliver ran and threw himself into his father's arms, signing desperately. "Mr. Stanford," Helen began, her voice calm. "I'm sorry to say this, but we found the stolen money from your safe in Lisa's bag." Richard looked at Lisa, then at the police officers, then back at Helen. "Stop this right now." "But sir, I said stop." He walked over to the officers. "There will be no statement. There was no theft." "But the money? I gave Lisa permission to use my money whenever she needs it. No crime was committed." Helen turned pale. "But sir," Richard cut her off with a cold stare. "Wait here." He left the room and went straight to the office. 2 minutes later, he came back holding a tablet. "I want everyone to see this." He opened the security camera app and played the video. The footage clearly showed Helen entering Lisa's room, opening her bag, and putting the money inside. The silence that followed was deafening. Helen tried to speak, but no words came out. "Can you explain this?" Richard asked, his voice dangerously low. It was a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding? You set her up. You tried to ruin the life of an innocent person." Helen stepped back. "Please, Mr. Stanford. You're fired. I want you out of my house within the hour." "No, please, I've worked here for 10 years. And you threw it all away out of jealousy." Richard turned to the officers. "I'm sorry for the trouble. As you can see, there was no theft. It was a setup." The officers exchanged looks and put away their notepads. "We understand. Sorry for the inconvenience." They left, and Helen, her eyes filled with tears, went upstairs to pack her things. Lisa stood frozen in the middle of the room, still trying to process everything. Richard walked toward her slowly. "Are you all right?" She shook her head, tears finally streaming down her face. "I can't take this anymore. I can't stand being humiliated again." "I know. And I'm sorry. I think I should leave." Richard took her hand, firm but gentle. "Please stay." "Richard, I need you here, and not just because of my son." Lisa looked up, surprised. There was something different in the way he looked at her, something that went beyond gratitude. The mood shifted. The air between them felt warmer, heavier. Richard stepped closer, and Lisa didn't move away. They stood there, eyes locked, hearts beating in sync. Then Richard's phone rang. He closed his eyes in frustration, but answered. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was tense, urgent. "Mr. Stanford, we have a problem. The company is under investigation for corruption. The FBI just arrived." Richard felt the blood drain from his face. "What?" "They're seizing documents. They say there's evidence of tax fraud and money laundering." "That's impossible." "Sir, you need to come back now." Richard hung up, his face pale. Lisa touched his arm. "What is it?" He looked at her, and for the first time, Lisa saw fear in his eyes. "My company is being investigated for corruption." And in that moment, Lisa realized the storm was just beginning. Richard ran out of the mansion without even saying a proper goodbye. Lisa stood in the living room, listening to the sound of his car disappearing into the distance. Oliver tugged at her sleeve, signing, "What's going on?" Lisa knelt down and signed back, "Your dad has a problem at work. But everything will be okay." She wasn't sure she believed her own words. In the hours that followed, the news exploded. Every TV channel was talking about the scandal. Richard Stanford's company was being investigated for financial crimes. There were suspicions of fraud, forged documents, embezzled money. Lisa watched it all on the living room television, her stomach in knots. The images showed Richard entering the company building, surrounded by lawyers and reporters. Camera flashes exploded in his face. Microphones were shoved in front of him. "Mr. Stanford, is it true you diverted millions of dollars? How long has this fraud been going on? Do you have a statement?" Richard didn't say a word. He just walked into the building, his face grim. Lisa turned off the TV, unable to watch anymore. Oliver sat beside her, staring at the dark screen. "Is my dad guilty?" he signed. "No," Lisa answered firmly. "Your dad is a good man. Someone's lying." In the days that followed, things only got worse. The newspapers printed more and more aggressive headlines. Richard's reputation was being torn apart, company stock dropped sharply, clients canceled contracts, and worst of all, Oliver started having trouble at school. Lisa found out one day when she picked him up. He got in the car with his head down, eyes red. "What happened?" she signed, worried. "The kids are saying my dad is a thief." Lisa's heart broke. "They don't know anything. Don't listen to them." But Oliver started to shut down again. He stopped smiling, stopped playing, went back to the silence Lisa had seen on that first day. And she wasn't going to let that happen. That night, while Oliver was sleeping, Lisa had an idea. She picked up the phone Richard had given her, adjusted the room's lighting, and hit the record button. "Hi, everyone," she began, a little shy in front of the camera. "My name is Lisa, and I want to teach you something really special." She showed her hands and began to sign. "This is sign language. It's a way to talk without using words. And you know why I'm teaching this? Because I met an amazing little boy who showed me that sometimes the most important things don't need to be spoken out loud." She went on, teaching basic signs. Hello, thank you, friend, love. And then, at the end of the video, She spoke about empathy. We live in a world that judges people all the time. But do we really know their stories? Do we know what they're going through on the inside? Before judging someone, how about we try to understand them? She posted the video on a social network and went to bed without expecting much. The next morning, she woke up to her phone exploding with notifications. The video had gone viral. Thousands of views, hundreds of comments. "This is beautiful. I'm crying. We need more people like her in the world. Who is this woman? She's amazing." Lisa was in shock, but she didn't stop there. She made more videos, taught more signs, shared stories about Oliver without revealing his name. She talked about resilience, about love, about starting over, and little by little, things started to change. People began to see Richard differently, not as the cold businessman accused of fraud, but as a father fighting to reconnect with his son. Comments started to appear. "If Lisa believes in him, I do too. A man who inspires that much loyalty can't be bad. Let's give him a chance to explain before we judge." The tide was turning. Meanwhile, Richard was working day and night with his lawyers, reviewing documents, looking for proof, trying to find who had set him up. And finally, after exhausting days, he found out. 2 executives from the company, driven by greed, had stolen money and forged documents in Richard's name. They thought he'd never find out. But they underestimated a man fighting for his honor. The evidence was turned over to the FBI. The guilty parties were arrested, and the investigation against Richard was closed. When he came home that night, he looked 10 years older. His eyes were sunken, his face pale, his shoulders slumped. Lisa was waiting in the living room. "Is it over?" she asked softly. "It's over," he replied, collapsing onto the couch. She sat beside him without saying a word. She just stayed there, quiet, offering her presence. After a few minutes, Richard spoke. "Thank you for the videos, for standing up for me when no one else did. I just told the truth." He turned to her, and there was something different in his eyes. "How did you end up on the streets, Lisa?" She blinked, surprised by the question. "Why do you want to know?" "Because I want to really know you." Lisa took a deep breath. It had been a long time since she talked about it. "It was just me and my mom," she began, her voice low. "My dad left us when I was little. My mom worked hard to raise me on her own. We didn't have much, but we were happy." Richard listened quietly. "Then she got sick. Cancer. I tried to take care of her, but I couldn't. She passed away, and I fell into depression. I felt so lost, so alone, I couldn't do anything. I was evicted from the home we lived in." She wiped away a tear that had slipped down. "I didn't have a profession, no diploma. I picked up odd jobs, washing dishes, cleaning houses, but it wasn't enough to pay rent. I found a tiny apartment, but 3 months later I was evicted again. And then, there was nowhere else to go. I ended up on the streets. I started making bracelets to buy food." Richard felt his chest tighten. Without thinking, he pulled her into a hug, a tight hug, full of unspoken things. "You're the strongest person I know," he whispered. Lisa buried her face in his shoulder and let the tears fall. When they pulled apart, their faces were close, very close. Richard looked into her eyes, then at her lips, and before he could think twice, he kissed her. Lisa kissed him back. The kiss was soft, gentle, full of feeling. When they pulled away, she was out of breath. "I'm feeling something for you," she confessed, her voice trembling. "Me too," Richard said, holding her face in his hands. "I've felt it for a while." Lisa smiled, but then remembered something important. "We need to take it slow. I don't want to hurt Oliver. He's been through so much. I don't want him to think I'm trying to replace his mother." "You're right." They sat there, side by side, holding hands in a quiet, comfortable silence. The following days felt lighter. Richard went back to work, but he now spent more time at home. Oliver was smiling again. Life finally seemed to be falling into place. Until one afternoon, while cleaning the room, Lisa found an old box under the bed. It was dusty and forgotten. Curious, she opened it. Inside were old documents from Richard's company. Contracts, receipts, payroll forms. Lisa was about to close it when something caught her eye. A name. A name she knew very well. Rebecca Thompson. Her mother. Her heart skipped a beat. She grabbed the document and read it. It was a termination letter, dated 10 years ago. Due to repeated absences and declining productivity, employee Rebecca Thompson is hereby dismissed from her duties, effective immediately. Lisa felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. Her mother had worked at Richard's company and had been fired. Her hands trembled as she read through more documents. She discovered that the dismissal happened just months before her mother passed away, just months before everything collapsed. And the reason? Her mother had been sick, missing work for treatments, and instead of getting support, she was let go. Lisa felt the anger rising, burning from the inside. Everything made sense now. The poverty, the desperation, her mother's death, and Richard was at the center of it all. She clutched the documents tightly, tears streaming down her face. How could she love someone, knowing his company had destroyed her mother's life and hers? Lisa went downstairs with the documents clutched in her hand. Her heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might burst out of her chest. She found Richard in his office, focused on papers spread out across the desk. She knocked on the door, hard. Richard looked up, surprised. "Lisa, what happened?" She threw the documents onto the desk, the pages scattered everywhere. "Care to explain this?" Richard picked up one of the sheets and began to read. His expression slowly shifted from confusion to shock. "Where did you get this?" "Found it in an old box, under the bed." He kept reading, his face growing paler by the second. "Rebecca Thompson," he murmured. "That name? That's my mother," Lisa shouted, already in tears. "My mother worked for your company, and you fired her because she was sick." Richard jumped to his feet. "Lisa, I didn't know." "You didn't know? How could you not know? It's your company. That was 10 years ago. I barely worked there at the time." Lisa shook her head in disbelief. "There's always an excuse, isn't there? Always someone else to blame." "Wait, let me explain." "There's nothing to explain. My mother was fired while fighting cancer. She lost her job, lost her health insurance, and not long after, she died." Her voice cracked at the last word. Richard ran a hand down his face, desperate. "Oh my God. Lisa, I swear I didn't know. Back then my father was running everything. I only took over after he retired." Lisa froze, trying to process what he'd said. "Your father? He was strict, cold. He made decisions without thinking about people. I've spent years trying to undo the damage he caused." She looked into his eyes, searching for lies, but all she saw was sincerity and pain. "Even if it was your father, it's still your company. It's still your name." "I know." Silence fell heavy between them. Lisa wiped her tears and took a step back. "I thought this place was different. I thought I had finally found somewhere I belonged. But all of this, it was just an illusion." "It wasn't an illusion. What we built here is real." "How can it be real when it was built on lies?" Richard tried to move closer, but she raised her hand, asking him to stay back. "I need to leave." "Lisa, please." "No, it's over." She turned and ran upstairs to her room. Richard stayed in the office, feeling the world collapse around him. Half an hour later, Lisa came down with her backpack on. She walked straight past the living room, without looking back. That's when she saw Oliver standing by the door, holding a piece of paper. Her heart broke. The boy's eyes were red, his hands trembling. He handed her the paper. Lisa took it and read the words, written in a child's handwriting. "Family doesn't run away." She closed her eyes, holding the paper to her chest. She wanted to stay. She wanted to hug that boy and tell him everything would be all right. But she couldn't. "I'm sorry, champ," she whispered, kneeling to hug him. "I have to go." Oliver hugged her back, crying silently. When Lisa pulled away and walked out the door, it felt like she was tearing her own heart out. The days that followed were empty. Lisa went back to the park, to the same old bench, to the same routine of selling bracelets. But nothing was the same. Everything felt dull, lifeless. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Oliver completely shut down. He stopped eating properly, stopped playing, and spent his days staring out the window, hoping Lisa would come back. Richard tried to talk to him, but the boy barely looked at him. One night, while putting Oliver to bed, Richard noticed the piece of paper the boy had written still tucked under his pillow. "Family doesn't run away." He sat on the edge of the bed and held his son's hand. "You're right," he said softly. "Family doesn't run, and I'm going to bring her back." The next day, Richard made a decision. He met with his lawyers and announced he would donate a significant part of his fortune to a social program focused on helping people who lost their jobs due to health issues. "I want this to be public," he said. "I want everyone to know we're making things right." The lawyers tried to argue, but he wouldn't budge. After that, he went out searching for Lisa. He drove all over the city, went to every place he thought she might be, until finally he found her. But she wasn't at the park. She was at a small community center in Brooklyn, surrounded by children. She was teaching sign language, using exaggerated gestures that made the kids laugh. Richard stood at the door, watching. Even after everything, even with a broken heart, she was still helping others. Lisa turned and saw him. Her smile disappeared. She said something to the children and stepped out the side door, heading straight to the street. Richard ran after her. "Lisa, wait." She walked faster, but he caught up. "Please just listen to me." "I don't have anything to listen to. I donated part of my fortune to a social program to help people who were unfairly fired because of health issues, like your mother." Lisa stopped but didn't turn around. "I can't change the past," Richard went on, his voice tight. "I can't bring your mother back, but I can try to do better from now on, and I need you for that." She finally turned, tears streaming down her face. "Why? Why me?" "Because you taught me how to be better. Because you brought my son back to me. Because I love you." Lisa's eyes widened. "Don't say that." "It's the truth. I love you, Lisa. And I know I messed everything up, but please, give me a chance to make it right." She shook her head, overwhelmed, emotional, not knowing what to say. That's when they heard the sound. An engine revving. Tires screeching on the pavement. Lisa turned and saw a car speeding toward her, out of control. There was no time to react. Richard shouted and tried to pull her out of the way, but it was too late. The car came to a sudden stop, tires smoking, and halted just inches from her. Lisa fell to the ground, her heart racing, her body shaking. Richard dropped to his knees beside her, holding her tightly. "Are you okay? Are you hurt?" She shook her head, still in shock. The driver got out, pale as a sheet. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. The brakes failed. I couldn't stop." Richard helped Lisa to her feet, and the two of them stood there, holding each other, breathing deeply, trying to process what had just happened. "You almost died," Richard whispered, holding her close. Lisa buried her face in his shoulder and for the first time in days let herself feel. The fear, the relief, and something else, something she had tried to deny, but it was there, strong and real. She still loved him, and maybe, just maybe, there was a way back. When Lisa opened her eyes, the first thing she saw was a white ceiling, then fluorescent lights, and finally the steady beep of a monitor beside her. Hospital. She blinked, trying to understand what had happened. Her head hurt. Actually, her whole body hurt. She turned her face and saw Oliver sitting in a chair, his eyes fixed on her. When he realized she was awake, his face lit up. He started signing quickly. "You're awake? You're okay." Lisa gave a faint smile and tried to sign back, but her arms felt heavy. "Easy, champ. Slow down." Oliver moved closer to the bed and gently held her hand like she might break. "Don't leave," he signed, eyes full of tears. "Please don't leave again." Lisa's heart tightened. She squeezed his hand back. "I won't." That's when she noticed someone else in the room. Richard was standing near the window, arms crossed, looking exhausted. It seemed like he hadn't slept in days. When their eyes met, he slowly walked over. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck, or almost did." He gave a faint smile. "The doctor said you were lucky, just a few scrapes and a scare, nothing serious." "Lucky? I nearly got flattened in front of a community center." Richard chuckled softly, and Lisa realized how much she had missed that sound. He pulled up a chair and sat beside the bed, gently holding her hand. "You gave me the biggest scare of my life. Sorry, I didn't mean to." There was a quiet pause. Oliver carefully climbed onto the bed and lay down next to Lisa, resting his head on her shoulder. Richard looked at the two of them and felt his chest tighten with emotion. "You taught me how to hear what silence screams," he said softly. Lisa raised her eyebrows and laughed. "That was way too poetic for a man in a suit." "I learned from the best." She smiled, and for the first time in days, she felt like maybe things could fall back into place. In the days that followed, while Lisa recovered in the hospital, something unexpected happened. A local reporter showed up in her room, along with a cameraman. "Lisa Thompson?" he asked, excited. Lisa looked at him, suspicious. "Who's asking?" "My name is Tom Harris. I'm a reporter with Channel 7. I saw your videos teaching sign language. They went viral." "Viral?" "Millions of views. People are loving it. You're becoming a symbol of resilience and inclusion." Lisa blinked, confused. "A symbol? I was just teaching signs." But you did it in such a human, honest way. People connected with it. We want to do a story about you." Richard, who had been sitting quietly in the corner of the room, stood up. "She's recovering. This isn't the time for interviews. Just 5 minutes. I promise we won't tire her out." Lisa looked at Richard, then at the reporter. "It's all right. 5 minutes." The interview was short but meaningful. Lisa talked about Oliver, how learning sign language changed her life, and about empathy and inclusion. When the segment aired that night, the response was overwhelming. Social media blew up. Lisa gained thousands of followers. Supportive messages poured in from everywhere. "You inspired me to learn sign language. My daughter is deaf, and I've never seen anyone talk about this with such care. The world needs more people like you." But along with the attention came pressure. 2 days later, while Lisa was still in the hospital, a man in a suit walked into the room. He was tall, tan, with very white teeth and a rehearsed smile. "Lisa Thompson!" "Finally," he said, extending his hand. "My name is David Klein, executive producer at Network Plus." Lisa shook his hand, unsure. "Nice to meet you. I'm here with a proposal that could change your life." Richard, who was helping Oliver with homework in the corner, looked up, instantly alert. "What kind of proposal?" Lisa asked. David pulled up a chair and sat down, full of energy. "We want to turn your story into a reality show. Picture this. From the streets to stardom, Lisa's journey. We follow your life, your sign language lessons, your relationship with Oliver, everything." Lisa's eyes widened. "A reality show about me?" "Exactly. You're authentic, inspiring, real. The audience will love it." Richard stood up and crossed his arms. "She's not doing that." David looked at him, surprised. "With all due respect, Mr. Stanford, I think that's her decision. And I think you're trying to take advantage of someone in a vulnerable position." "Take advantage? I'm offering her an opportunity." Lisa raised her hand, interrupting. "All right, both of you, let me think." David smiled, confident. "Of course. Just don't take too long. We have others interested in the slot." He left a business card on the table beside her bed and walked out. When the door closed, Richard turned to Lisa. "You're not going to accept that, are you?" "Why not?" "Because those shows destroy people. They edit everything, twist the story, and turn your life into a circus. Or it could be a chance to reach even more people, to teach signs to millions." Richard shook his head. "This isn't about teaching. It's about ratings. About money." Lisa sighed, tired. "Richard, I spent my whole life being invisible, and now for the first time people are paying attention. Maybe that's a good thing. Or maybe it's a trap." She looked at him. "You don't trust me to make this decision." "I trust you. I just don't trust them." Oliver, who'd been watching silently, signed, "What are you two arguing about?" Lisa smiled and replied in sign language, "Just boring adult stuff." He laughed. That night, alone in the hospital room, Lisa picked up David's card and stared at it. The offer was tempting. A lot of money, national exposure, the chance to make a difference on a bigger scale. But Richard was right. There were risks, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for all of that. She put the card in the drawer and closed her eyes, trying to rest. But sleep didn't come easily. The decision weighed on her, and deep down, Lisa knew that whatever choice she made would change everything. For better or worse, she didn't know yet. But one thing was certain, her life would never be the same. 3 days later, Lisa was discharged from the hospital. She returned to the mansion, but the atmosphere had changed. Tense. Richard barely spoke to her, and every time the subject of the reality show came up, he changed the topic. One morning during breakfast, David Klein called. "Lisa, how's your recovery going?" "Getting better." "Great, because I have amazing news. I got $1 million contract approved for you. $1 million for a full season of the reality show." Lisa nearly dropped her glass of juice. "$1 million? That's right. You deserve it, sweetheart. Your story's going to inspire the whole country." Richard, who was reading the newspaper across the table, immediately looked up. "I need to think about it," Lisa said nervously. "Of course, but don't take too long. The offer expires in 48 hours. She hung up and found Richard staring at her. $1 million? He asked, in a tone she couldn't quite read. "That's what he said." Richard folded the newspaper and tossed it on the table. "And you're thinking of accepting it?" "Maybe." "Lisa, that's crazy." "Crazy is turning down $1 million. He stood up, running a hand through his hair. "You don't understand. These shows will tear you apart. They'll take your story and turn it into cheap entertainment. Or maybe they'll give me a platform to make a real difference. Difference? They just want ratings. They'll edit everything and make you look ridiculous. Lisa stood up too, upset. Do you think I'm ridiculous? No, but they'll make it seem like you are. Maybe you're just afraid I won't need you anymore once I have my own money. The words came out harsher than she intended. Richard froze, as if she had slapped him. Is that really what you think of me? Lisa looked away, regretful. I don't know what to think. Richard grabbed his car keys. Do whatever you want, Lisa, but don't say I didn't warn you. He walked out, slamming the door. Oliver, who had been quietly watching the whole thing, signed to Lisa. Did you two fight? She sighed and replied, Grown-ups are complicated, champ. That afternoon, Lisa called David and accepted the offer. 2 days later, she signed the papers. A week after that, filming began. At first, everything seemed perfect. A professional crew, beautiful sets, interesting questions. Lisa felt important, heard. But little by little, she started noticing strange things. The questions got more and more invasive. The writers kept pushing certain parts of the story. Talk more about how hard life was on the streets, the director would say. Try to cry a little, if you can. I didn't cry that much, Lisa would answer. But we need to move the audience. Then came the day of the live show, a 2-hour special telling Lisa's full story. The studio was packed, the audience excited, cameras everywhere. Lisa was backstage, wearing an outfit she didn't choose, when she heard the show's intro. Tonight, the inspiring story of a woman who went from the streets into the arms of a billionaire. Lisa Thompson, the homeless woman who won New York's heart. She froze. Homeless? Won a billionaire? That's not right, she whispered. The stagehand gave her a gentle nudge. It's time. Let's go. Lisa walked onto the stage to loud applause. She sat in the chair next to the host, a man with a wide smile and perfect teeth. Lisa Thompson, what an honor to have you here. Thank you. Your story is incredible. A homeless woman with nothing, and suddenly you're rescued by a charming billionaire. Lisa frowned. That's not exactly what happened. Of course it is. You were selling bracelets when Richard Stanford found you and changed your life. He didn't change my life. I changed my life. The host laughed, like she'd told a joke. Such humility. But we all know that without him, you'd still be on the streets. Something inside Lisa snapped. She looked at the cameras, at the audience, at the monitors showing her face close-up, and she saw exactly what Richard had warned her about. They were turning her story into a fairy tale. The poor girl rescued by the rich prince. No, she said firmly. The host blinked. Excuse me? Lisa stood up. No, this is wrong. Lisa, please sit down, we're live. I know we're live, and that's exactly why I need to speak. She turned to the cameras, took a deep breath, and began. You want to hear my story? I'll tell you the truth. I lived on the streets, I went hungry, I slept out in the cold. But you know what I never was? A victim waiting to be saved. The audience went quiet. No one saves anyone. That idea that we need a hero to pull us out of the hole, that's a lie. We heal when someone believes in us. When someone sees our worth. Richard didn't save me. He saw me, he gave me a chance, but I did the work. She pointed at the camera. And if there's anyone out there going through a hard time, hear this. You don't need a billionaire. You need an opportunity, and someone who believes you're capable. Because you are. Tears were streaming down her face now. I'm not the beggar who got saved. I'm the woman who stood up, and no one can take that away from me. She took off the lapel mic and placed it on the table. Thank you for the opportunity, but I'm not going to be part of a story that isn't mine. And she walked off the stage. The audience burst into applause. The host was speechless. The producers were panicking backstage, but Lisa didn't care. She grabbed her things and left the studio. On the other side of the city, at the mansion, Richard was watching everything on TV. Oliver was next to him, both of them glued to the screen. When Lisa gave her speech, Richard felt a tightness in his chest. Her words echoed inside him, touching places that had been closed off for years. My God, he whispered. I love this woman. Oliver looked at his dad and smiled, signing, I knew it. Richard jumped to his feet. Where are you going? Oliver signed. To get her. He grabbed the car keys and ran out. He drove through the streets of New York like a madman, heart racing. He didn't know exactly where she'd be, but he had a hunch. And he was right. When he got to the park, he saw her, sitting on the same bench where it had all started, looking up at the sky. Richard parked and got out slowly. He walked up to her, hands in his pockets. "Mind if I sit?" Lisa looked at him, eyes still red, and nodded yes. They sat in silence for a moment, just feeling the night breeze. "I saw your speech," Richard finally said. "And?" "It was the most amazing thing I've ever seen." Lisa laughed, wiping her tears. "I ruined everything. I walked off in the middle of a live taping." "You didn't ruin anything. You were honest." He turned to her, taking her hand in his. "You were right. I never saved you. You saved me. You taught me what really matters. You taught me how to be a father again. You taught me how to love again." Lisa felt her heart race. "Richard, I love you, Lisa. And it's not because you're a symbol or an inspiration. It's because you're you. Funny, stubborn, brave. You make me want to be better." She smiled, tears returning, but this time they were happy tears. "I love you too, you idiot." He laughed and pulled her into a kiss. A long, deep kiss, full of promises. When they pulled away, Lisa leaned her forehead against his. "So now what?" "Now we start over the right way," she smiled. "On a park bench? If it's with you, it can be anywhere." And right there, on the bench where it all began, Lisa and Richard found not an ending, but a new beginning. Because sometimes, love doesn't come to rescue, it comes to add. And that made all the difference. The night was cold, but Lisa barely noticed. She felt warm there, in Richard's arms, sitting on the bench that had witnessed the start of it all. "Funny," she said, looking around. "Just a few months ago, I was here selling bracelets, never imagining my life would turn upside down." Richard smiled, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "I never imagined I'd meet someone like you either." In the middle of a park, making jokes about pigeons, Lisa laughed, resting her head on his shoulder. "Who would have thought, huh?" The millionaire became the beggar's student. Richard let out a genuine laugh. "And the beggar became the heart of my home." They looked at each other, and the world around them seemed to fade away. Richard leaned in and kissed her again, slowly, gently, like they had all the time in the world. When they pulled away, they heard footsteps. They turned and saw Oliver running toward them, a huge smile on his face. "Champ," Lisa signed, surprised. "How did you get here?" Oliver pointed to the driver waiting near the car, waving from a distance. "I asked him to bring me. I knew you'd be here." He climbed up onto the bench between them and made a sign that made both of them laugh. "Marriage." Lisa blushed right away. "Hey, slow down. Who said anything about marriage?" Oliver insisted, making the sign again, this time pointing at both of them with extra emphasis. Richard laughed, ruffling his son's hair. "Looks like someone already decided our future. He's a bit bossy, isn't he?" Lisa joked. Oliver crossed his arms, pretending to be offended, but his smile gave him away. The three of them stayed there for a while longer, chatting in signs, laughing, enjoying the simplicity of that moment. No cameras, no spotlights, just them. 2 weeks later, Lisa was helping Oliver with his homework when the mail arrived. Among the bills and ads, there was an official envelope. Her name was written by hand, in old-fashioned, careful handwriting. "What's this?" she murmured, opening the envelope. Inside, a letter from the law firm Miller & Associates. "Dear Lisa Thompson, we inform you that you have been identified as the sole heir to the property located at 428 Maple Street, Brooklyn, NY. The house belonged to your late mother, Rebecca Thompson, and is now legally in your name. For more information, please contact us." Lisa read the letter 3 times, unable to believe it. "A house," she whispered. "My mom had a house?" Oliver noticed her expression and signed. "What happened?" I think I inherited a house." She showed the letter to Richard, who had just gotten home from work. "Is this for real?" he asked, reading quickly. "Looks like it. But I don't understand. My mom never owned a house. We always rented." Richard picked up the phone. "I'll call the office and schedule a visit. We need to see this ourselves." The next day, the 3 of them went to the address. It was an old neighborhood in Brooklyn, with small houses and trees lining the sidewalks. When the car stopped in front of number 428, Lisa felt her heart race. The house was simple. 2 stories, peeling paint, overgrown garden, but something about it felt familiar, like it touched a deep part of Lisa's memory. "I know this place," she murmured. "I've been here before." The lawyer was waiting at the door, holding a folder of documents. "Miss Thompson? I'm James Miller. Nice to meet you." This house, it really belonged to my mother? Yes. Purchased in 1995, fully paid off by 2003. She never sold it, but she never came back either. Lisa looked at the house, trying to piece things together. Why didn't she ever tell me? James hesitated. Well, according to the documents we found, your mother left this house suddenly in 2005. There are police reports involving domestic violence. Lisa's legs felt weak. Violence? Yes. Your father, Daniel Thompson, was arrested several times for assault. Your mother fled the house with you, who was 5 at the time, and never came back. She probably kept the property as a backup, but never returned out of fear of being found. Lisa covered her mouth with her hand as tears began to fall. I didn't know. I barely remember anything from that time. Richard held her hand tightly. Your mother protected you. She did what she had to do. James handed her the keys. The house is yours now. You can do whatever you want with it. Lisa took the keys, the metal cold and heavy in her hand. They went inside together. The interior was dusty, with furniture covered in old sheets and a musty smell in the air. Still, there were memories hidden in every corner. Lisa stopped in the living room and closed her eyes. Suddenly, images came back, her younger self playing on the floor, her mother smiling, singing a song, and then yelling. Things breaking. Fear. She saved me, Lisa whispered. She gave up everything to protect me. Richard wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. And now you can honor that. Turn this place into something new. Lisa looked around, her mind starting to turn. I know what I want to do, she said, turning to him. I want to turn this house into a school, a sign language school, free for kids in need, for families who can't afford it, a place where everyone is heard, even in silence. Richard smiled, proud. It's perfect. Oliver, who had been exploring the rooms, came running back and signed. Can I help? Lisa knelt down and signed back. Of course you can. You'll be the assistant teacher. He jumped with excitement, and the three of them hugged right there. In the middle of a house once filled with pain, now about to be filled with hope. In the following weeks, the renovation began. Richard hired a construction team. Lisa picked the colors, planned the rooms, and thought through every little detail. They painted the walls a soft yellow, installed big windows to let in the light, built a spacious classroom with boards, teaching materials, and even a small stage for performances. Lisa worked day and night, pouring love into every repaired wall and corner. And as the house came back to life, Lisa felt herself being rebuilt too. Not just surviving, but thriving. One afternoon, while they were hanging posters of the sign language alphabet on the walls, Richard paused and looked at her. Are you happy? Lisa smiled, wiping the sweat from her forehead. More than I ever thought I could be. He stepped closer and gently held her face in his hands. Then answer me something. What? Would you spend the rest of your life with me? Lisa's eyes widened. You're proposing in the middle of a renovation? Technically, Oliver already did. I'm just making it official. She laughed, tears welling up again. You don't even have a ring. I have this. He pulled one of the bracelets Lisa had made months ago from his pocket, the same one he'd kept since the very first day. It's not a diamond, but it means a lot more. Lisa looked at the bracelet, at the man standing in front of her, and felt her heart overflow. Yes, she said, smiling. 1,000 times yes. And right there, in a house that had once been filled with fear, but was now becoming a symbol of new beginnings, Lisa and Richard made one more promise, that together they could turn any ruin into a home. 6 months later, the house was unrecognizable. What once was a place marked by pain now shined with new life. The yellow walls reflected the sunlight, the large windows let in the fresh air, and a colorful garden decorated the front. At the gate, a hand-painted wooden sign read, Hope Sign School. Everyone is welcome here. It was opening day. Dozens of people gathered in the garden. Children ran across the lawn, parents chatted excitedly, and the local press was there to cover it all. Lisa stood in the middle of the crowd, wearing a simple peach-colored dress, her hair loose in the wind. She was smiling so much her cheeks already hurt. Richard walked up behind her and wrapped his arms around her. Nervous? A little. What if no one wants to learn? He pointed to the dozens of people around them. I think that fear already passed. Lisa laughed and turned to him. Thank you. For believing in me. For making this possible. I just gave the money. You gave it the heart. Oliver came running over, holding the hand of a girl his age. She also used sign language, and the two were excitedly talking with their hands. "Dad, Lisa, this is Julia. She's deaf like me." Lisa crouched down and greeted the girl in signs. "Hi, Julia, welcome." The girl smiled shyly and replied, "Thank you. I've never had a teacher who spoke my language." Lisa's heart swelled. That made it all worth it. The opening was a success. Lisa taught the first class, showing basic signs to a mixed group of children and adults. At the end, everyone applauded, and she knew without a doubt she was exactly where she was meant to be. When night fell and the guests had gone, Lisa, Richard, and Oliver stayed in the garden, resting on plastic chairs. "Tired?" Richard asked. "Exhausted, but happy." Oliver was lying on the grass looking at the stars. Suddenly, he sat up and signed something. "Dad, when are you going to propose to her for real?" Richard almost choked on his water. "What? You gave her a bracelet. That's not a real proposal. You need a ring on one knee, the whole thing." Lisa burst into laughter. "He's right." Richard looked at the two of them, stunned. "Did you two plan this?" "No." Lisa and Oliver replied at the same time, one with signs, the other with his voice. Richard shook his head, but he was smiling. "Okay, you win." 3 weeks later, on a sunny Saturday, Richard asked Lisa to go for a drive. "Where are we going?" she asked as he drove. "It's a surprise." They arrived at the same park where it all began. Lisa looked around, confused. "Why are we here?" "You'll see." He led her to the bench, and that's when Lisa noticed. There were balloons tied to the trees, flower petals scattered on the ground, and Oliver standing in the middle of it all, holding a sign. Lisa read the sign and burst out laughing. She said yes once. "Let's try again with witnesses." "You two are ridiculous," Lisa shouted, laughing so hard she could barely breathe. Richard knelt down in front of the bench and pulled a small box from his pocket. "Lisa Thompson, you are the most amazing, funny, stubborn, and brave woman I've ever met. You changed my life, my son's life, and the lives of dozens of people. You taught me how to listen, how to feel, how to truly love. Will you marry me? For real this time?" Lisa wiped away her tears, still laughing. "With a ring and everything?" "With a ring and everything." She held out her hand, trembling. "Yes, of course, yes." Richard slipped the ring on her finger. It was simple, delicate, perfect. They kissed while Oliver clapped and cheered. 2 months later, the big day arrived. The wedding would take place in the school garden, a place that represented everything they had built together. The decorations were simple but beautiful. Lights hung from the trees, wildflowers in vases, white chairs arranged in rows. A small wooden altar was draped with light fabrics. Lisa was in one of the school's rooms, adjusting her dress. It was white, light, with delicate lace on the shoulders. Nothing fancy, but perfect for her. There was a knock on the door. "Come in." Oliver walked in, wearing a tiny suit that made him look like a miniature grown-up. He stopped and looked her up and down, his eyes wide. "You look beautiful," he signed. "Thank you, champ." "You look very handsome, too." He laughed, then made another sign. "Ready to be my mom?" Lisa felt her eyes sting. She knelt down in front of him and held his small hands. "I felt like your mom for a long time." Oliver hugged her tightly, and they stayed like that for a moment, in silence but saying everything. The ceremony began with the sound of a soft guitar. The guests were seated, smiling. Lisa walked down the improvised aisle. No veil, no grand entrance, just herself. When she reached the altar and saw Richard waiting, her heart started to race. He looked handsome in his light blue suit, his eyes shining with emotion. The officiant began the ceremony, but before the formal words, Oliver stepped forward and came up to the altar. He signed to the audience, and someone translated aloud, "Love speaks all languages. It doesn't need sound to be heard. It doesn't need words to be understood. My dad and Lisa taught me that. And today, I'm the happiest person in the world because they're becoming a real family." The audience was moved. Some people were openly crying. Lisa looked at Richard and signed, just for him. "Now you've learned how to listen with your heart." He smiled, eyes full of tears, and returned the same sign slowly, carefully. The officiant continued, and when it was time for the vows, Lisa spoke first. "Richard, I spent so much time thinking I needed to be saved, but you showed me that I've always been strong. You didn't save me, you saw me, and that changed everything. I promise to love you, to support you, and to remind you every day that you are so much more than you think." Richard wiped away a tear and began. Lisa, you came into my life like a storm. You turned everything upside down, and thank God for that. You pulled me out of my comfort zone, made me laugh again, taught me how to be a real father. I promise to listen to you, always, with my ears, my eyes, and most of all, with my heart. Oliver brought the rings on a small cushion, beaming with pride. They exchanged rings, and when the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," the audience erupted in applause. The celebration was simple: live music, homemade food, and heartfelt laughter. There was no luxury, but there was plenty of love. Lisa and Richard danced their first song in the middle of the garden, under lights gently swaying in the breeze. "Happy?" he asked, spinning her slowly. "More than I ever thought possible." Oliver joined the dance, and soon others did too. Children ran between tables, adults chatted excitedly, and everything felt just right. Later, as the night wore on and the guests began to leave, Lisa and Richard sat on a bench in the garden, looking at the stars. "We did it," she said, resting her head on his shoulder. "We did. From living on the streets to owning a school, from being alone to being married. Who would have thought, huh?" Richard kissed her forehead. "I always knew you were special." "Liar. You thought I was crazy." He laughed. "Maybe a little, but it was exactly the kind of crazy I needed." They stayed there in silence, holding hands, watching the garden lights go out one by one. And Lisa realized something. She wasn't searching for a place to call home anymore. Because home wasn't a place, it was people. Richard, who truly saw her. Oliver, who loved her unconditionally. And that school, born out of pain, now blooming with hope. A love born from silence. An ending in forever.
If this journey of resilience and turning pain into power resonated with your heart, please join the conversation. Stories. Your comments and engagement are part of the healing process. Help us build a sanctuary of strength. Let us know your thoughts subscribing to the channel. Share the hope. Give this video a like and share it with someone who needs to hear this message of recovery and justice. Your support allows us to continue sharing powerful narratives of overcoming trauma and finding peace. Subscribe to Healing Stories and be part of the change.